So with more information coming out with regards to the discovery of the body of Dee Warner, it's starting to become pretty clear that her husband, Dale Warner, was a bit of a moron. So I did a video yesterday which gave an outline of the case and discussed Dee's discovery. So if you missed that video, just a quick nutshell, putting it in a nutshell, Dee went missing 3.5 years ago, and this was after she had sent her daughter to stay with a close family friend because she was planning on ending the marriage and dissolving the business. And she was not seen again after that. And it was suspected that Dale Warner was responsible for whatever happened to Dee. He claimed that she had up and left and headed off to some overseas island somewhere, even though she left behind her 9-year-old daughter and also her wedding ring for some reason, because Dale kept her wedding ring. She did apparently, however, also take her curling iron. Go figure. I'm guessing that that is going to be quite possibly discovered with Dee's body, perhaps. So that's going back 3.5 years that Dee went missing. And the spotlight has been on Dale for quite some time. The case stalled for a while because local authorities struggled to know what they were doing, and so it did take a while to reach this resolution. There was a hearing several months back in which it was decided that there was enough evidence for Dale to go to trial for Dee's death. And his pre-trial hearing begins on the 3rd of September. So the timing of this is kind of perfect, really. So he is currently in jail awaiting trial. But let's talk about Dee being found and why this guy has got to be one of the dumbest criminals on the planet. So, interesting, I was listening to Billy Little talking about this case, and Billy Little became involved early on in the case because of the family. The family contacted him because they were having trouble getting law enforcement to push on with the case, and Billy Little went in and he started off an investigation and then handed everything he had over to Michigan State Police, who ran with the case and, as you know, now have discovered Dee's body. And Billy Little recently was talking about a profile of Dale and saying that he believed that Dale was the sort of person, the controlling person, that would make sure that he had full control so that Dee's remains would remain somewhere nearby. And that is the reason why there were continual searches of the properties owned by Dale and Dee. And they had quite a lot of assets. This is a couple who owned a trucking company. They together were worth quite a lot of money. Now, like I said, Billy Little suggested that wherever Dee was, she was going to be nearby. Now, let's talk about this anhydrous tank where Dee was found. So, we know from looking at the case that early on in the case, Dale refused law enforcement permission to search inside a fertiliser shed, claiming that it was dangerous for them to do so. Now we have a witness, or we have CCTV footage which showed Dale carrying welding equipment into one of the sheds on his property. And we have a witness who saw that Dale had sanded and resprayed a tank on his property. And it was from that witness remembering that law enforcement decided, hang on, this is what we need to be looking for. And they went into the property specifically looking for a tank that was different from the rest, one that had been freshly painted and one with a weld. Now here's where the stupidity comes in. First of all, these tanks, and there were apparently multiple tanks stored in one area, these tanks are factory made. So a rough weld on a tank is going to stand out like dog's balls. Basically, a rough weld means that something has been done to that tank since it left the factory. And when you're talking about something like a tank for fertiliser, this is clearly a liquid fertiliser, so there's no need for the tank to have this big, long weld in it. So that made it pretty easy for law enforcement to find the precise tank that they were looking for. After finding out that Dale had been welding a tank after realising he had been handling welding equipment after Dee went missing, and then having been told that he was seen sanding and painting a tank, then, put two and two together, you look for a tank with a big weld on the side of it. That tank's going to be very interesting. So, first of all, you have this massive weld on the tank, which makes it stand out as something that is worth looking at. Turns out there was also a sign on the tank saying, "Do not use." This tank was an empty tank, and he put a sign on it saying, "Do not use." Like, hello. It's a shame that law enforcement hadn't been communicating more with family earlier in the case, because this is something that could have been discovered several years ago. But the delays with really launching the case meant that it took this long for law enforcement to communicate with family the right information that would trigger a memory that led to the discovery of Dee's remains. So on the outside, we have a weld that is really obvious. We have a paint job that is a new paint job, makes it really obvious. And a sign on the tank saying, "Do not use." So, made it pretty easy to find the right tank. They apparently used a scanner, which is like what they would use on a border where they scan trucks, which is how they were able to ascertain that there was remains in that tank. And they also opened the tank up and put a viewing camera thing into the tank, and were able to confirm that there were remains in the tank. They then resealed the tank, and it went to the coroner's office. So let's talk about inside the tank, because here's the thing. So we know that her remains were sealed inside that tank. Now there is a time frame there that I'm not sure. Time frame hasn't been given, so we don't know how long after Dee went missing when her remains were put in that tank. But here's where this moron really screwed up. By sealing her in this tank. He sealed her in an airtight environment. He sealed her basically in a sarcophagus, meaning that her remains will have been very well preserved. When the autopsy is done, in the next 24 hours, I believe they said Tuesday, so that's Tuesday US time. So the autopsy is going to be done sometime within the next 24 hours. When the autopsy is done, there will be so much there because of how well her remains have been preserved. Chances are that they'll be able to find a cause of death pretty easily. But it's not just that makes this guy a twit. I mean, if you're going to kill someone, sure, make sure you preserve the remains so that the autopsy is easy enough that they can find cause of death. Like, duh. The guy didn't think about that, probably because he was too arrogant and thought that they would never find her sealed in tank. But here's the other thing. Not only was he preserving her remains, but he was preserving DNA evidence. Any DNA that he left inside that tank will have been fully preserved because it was airtight. There would have been no deterioration of DNA evidence whatsoever. Likewise, with any fibres that may have transferred from his clothes or his hands or whatever. Any kind of evidence like that will have been fully preserved. So this guy, they've pretty much got him bang to rights. And I'm willing to predict that if this guy is as arrogant as he sounds, chances are that when he sealed her in that tank, he probably wasn't taking precautions like wearing gloves, because he probably did believe that no one would ever find her. He stuck with his story of her probably having gone overseas and living on a tropical island somewhere with a new man. He never expected that they would find her. I'd imagine this guy's squirming right now in jail because honestly, it sounds like they've got him banged to rights. He has preserved not only Dee's remains, but all physical evidence that will then be used against him in court. I think that probably well and truly makes him someone who could be nominated for Moron of the Year.